You're listening to Wealthy AF, the podcast where we cut through all the BS and teach you what it truly means to be wealthy AF. And today's guest is Caleigh. Caleigh, how do I pronounce your last name? I don't want to...
Weichbrodt.
Caleigh.
Caleigh Weichbrodt.
There you go. In 2018, Caleigh was radically saved from a life of addiction and atheism by the Lord in a powerful encounter with Him. Since then, she's seen firsthand how surrendering your life to Christ opens the door for incredible transformation and has been healed from anxiety, depression, addiction, borderline personality disorder, and trauma. Today's topic that we'll be discussing is from atheism to a journey with God. Caleigh, thank you for coming on the show. It's my pleasure, my honor to have you here. This is a topic that for me, it's kind of near and dear because I've always been a spiritual person, always been in church, and it's just my belief and just who I am. So again, I always disclose this to people, on my listeners, when I'm bringing spirituality into the mix, not pushing my religion or any religion on anyone. It's just a perspective. I'm a very spiritual person. I believe that God is my savior, and that's my personal, Jesus is my savior, and that's my personal thing. So tell us your journey from atheism to being a believer in God.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me on. It's always an exciting opportunity to kind of branch out from just guesting on Christian podcasts to a different audience. And I mean, I relate so much to a lot of what you actually teach on this podcast, because for a long time, real estate investing and kind of making a break away from modeling, which was my background, was my end goal. So in my early teens, I got scouted to become a model, and this was a really exciting opportunity. I mean, I was going to get to be paid to travel all over the world and live in different places. It was a really exciting opportunity, but unfortunately, it opened my life up to a lot of options for seeking comfort in places that were not necessarily healthy for me. I found myself really addicted to control because of some deep-rooted insecurities. I didn't grow up thinking that I was beautiful. I was bullied in high school and in middle school. And so a lot of that identity still stuck with me, even though I was getting paid between $500 and $5,000 to shoot and shooting for high fashion brands. I was dating underwear models. Like, on the outside, it all looked like this person should not have a lack of confidence. And yet on the inside, I still just felt like a scrawny little tween that everyone always picked my older sister over me, kind of thing, you know. And so that mentality, that broken identity, led me to trying to control my life in a lot of different areas, whether it was through money or relationships. I was just really addicted to control, never being too dependent on anyone. And I think that really is important, because when I came to the Lord, or rather when He came to me and found me where I was, I had to realize that I had to lay it all down. It was really a moment of surrender that was scary, because I had never let myself be too dependent on anyone. But it's in this dependence on the Lord that I've now found so much peace in my life, so much joy that isn't tied to my circumstances, that really isn't even tied to my relationships, though I'm very blessed to have an amazing community. I have a beautiful family, and all of that has been possible for me because I chose to become healthily dependent on my Creator.
So, by the way, you're very beautiful. You're very pretty. So that limiting belief that you had, just I mean that very respectfully. So tell us about that scene. I want us to dig into that scene when you was a model, and you were going through this personality disorder. Tell us about your anxiety, your depression, your addiction. How old were you then first? So how old were you when you first became a model?
I was 16. And so, I mean, that's right in the middle of people I'm just starting to discover who they are. And
100%.
so then I'm getting paid to be a different person. You know, modeling is a bit like acting, not quite as intense, but you're still, putting on an act and embodying a certain kind of person for that day. And I think that this helped lend itself towards some of that personality disorder where I just really didn't know who I was. And then in my dating life, because I had this fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, and didn't want to be too dependent on anybody, I was just constantly dating multiple people. It really became an addiction for me, just kind of shuffling people around so that I was never too dependent on one person. And so I would become whatever I thought they wanted from me. So if they were into the glam girl, the way that I would dress, the way that I would act was different based on who I was around. I was very much a chameleon, and that led to a lot of anxiety because you never know if you're getting it right. And you never want to come across like you're putting on an act for someone. And I'll admit, I was not this aware of what I was doing either. I was just doing what I thought I was supposed to do, or what would produce the best outcome in those situations. I was very strategically minded. That worked really well in business. Not really a great mindset to have in relationships because it can turn into a lot of manipulation and just like coercing people and trying to protect myself, get what I wanted. It doesn't breed a lot of honesty or intimacy in relationships. And that's something that people by nature deeply crave, is to be known and to know others, to have connection, to have intimacy. We were just made that way. And so because I didn't live honestly, I couldn't have intimacy with anyone. My friends didn't really know who I was. I didn't really know who I was. People I was in relationships with, they didn't know who I was. And so I was just extremely anxious and depressed. I felt so alone in that season, with people cycling through friends, relationships. With work, I was never with the same people. So we would have an awesome day on set, or maybe it'd be, a multi-day shoot where we get a little bit closer even, hanging out outside of shooting. And then I would never see those people again. Maybe I would see them once or twice, but for the most part, I didn't work with any of the same people. And so my life was just a constant conveyor belt of new people, new relationships, new experiences, and new places, which sounds fun, but novelty eventually wears off. And the more novelty you have, the more you crave. It's sort of like you become overstimulated and you need more stimulation, more novelty, more newness in your life in order to feel that sense of excitement or thrill or desire. And so many of these things just led to me not being well positioned for living a normal life.
Are you still, you don't model anymore, do you?
No, I don't.
Okay, so at what point, in all fairness, you was just a 16-year-old kid. I'm not making excuses for you, but you was just a 16-year-old kid. Most of us at 16, we're all struggling with identity issues, trying to figure it out. 17, 18, 19, 20. We're all just trying to figure it out. Who are we? What do we stand for? And then you put a 16-year-old kid in that scene, and it's a recipe for it's not a good recipe for something good. So at what point did you know, Caleigh, that you was an atheist? Like, when did you make that distinction? I know you mentioned control, and I think all entrepreneurs, all of us that are entrepreneurs, have a flavor of that, of control. Like, hey, we're entrepreneurs. Most of us, if we're going to be honest, and my listenership is a lot of entrepreneurs, just achievers and doers. if we're honest with each other, most of us are entrepreneurs because we don't like the boss. So we thought we could do it better than the
Right.
company we were working for, right? And we would we want to go do it.
Yeah.
So, but at what point for you did you know that, hey, I don't believe in anything. I just don't believe in anything. When did you make that distinction?
Yeah, when I was a teenager, before I actually started modeling, is when I renounced my faith. So I grew up sort of in a Christian home. My parents had gotten saved when I was about 5, and then 5 years later, they went through just a messy, terrible divorce. That I just saw a lot of hypocrisy on display, and I started to become promiscuous. And that was something my parents did not really approve of. And so I was constantly just being grounded and getting in trouble and having fights with them. And I just saw them doing a lot of the same things that I was doing, but somehow it was acceptable for them. And I attributed all of this to religion. I attributed all of this to God. And I was like, I don't want to feel ashamed about these natural desires that I have and just this natural urge to do what I want to do. And to me, the best way to get out from under the thumb of God and my parents was to just push religion away so that I could be in control. If I deemed it appropriate, then it was appropriate and I didn't have to feel bad about it anymore. And so that's when I made the decision to become an atheist. But I was always spiritually minded. Even when I was an atheist, I was still searching for meaning in life. Like, I would still consider myself to be a seeker, even though I didn't like the idea of there being a God who had all of these rules and this like grand authority over my life, because I thought I could outsmart anybody. I mean, I just was incredibly arrogant and cocky and very much had an entrepreneurial mindset. My father was an entrepreneur and in real estate development. So I got a lot of that from him. And so I had this mindset that I could just figure it out, and I could probably figure out a way to have my cake and eat it too, have life the way I wanted it and find happiness. Find a sense of fulfillment. But unfortunately, that was just always like this far outside of reach. You know, that feeling where you're going after a money goal or, I mean, for me, it always kind of got tied up in money because that's how you live. That's how you survive. And being a model, money was very unstable. So I was always balancing the modeling with something on the side. I always had some kind of side hustle. I knew it wouldn't last forever. They weren't going to book me forever. I think most girls age out at around 23 to 25. 23 is when I left the industry. My regular clients stopped booking and started booking a similar haircut, pale brunette with short hair girl that was just 19 instead of how old I was. So I always had something going on the side, and I was always planning my escape route from modeling, so that I could try and get ahead enough while I had these connections to wealthy people and just people in different industries, trying to make something work.
That was actually wise of you, I think, in my opinion. I mean, that was very strategic in a way.
Yeah.
For a young person to be thinking in that way, because most girls, I would presume, are thinking that this is good. Most young people, right, think that when good times are rolling, they're going to roll in forever. Right? I know that's how I used to think. It was no bad times. The last great recession, I remember I was doing mortgages in 2006, and I made so much money. I had made more money in 2007 than I ever made in my career, and I didn't think it was going to stop because young person, just lack of vision and understanding. But kudos to you. You at least knew that the party was going to stop. You had that insight to know that you were planning your exit, like you said. Most young people that aren't planning that. What did you learn? What was your biggest lesson from your experience with your parents when you saw your parents as Christians, right? So there's a big thing in the Christian community, and a lot of times is that the people that turn away from the church or Christianity is they feel that Christians are hypocrites. Christians are hypocrites, and I've had that discussion in my household. Right, we debate that quite a bit here, my household, my kids, and my wife and I, and that Christians will go to church on Sunday and then they're beating on their wife on Monday, or doing something, or doing drugs, or drinking alcohol, and whatever, right? And
Yeah.
my thought process in that is that Christians are human beings. No one's perfect. And me personally, right, it's no one's business, it's no one's job to judge any other human being for their actions. It's not up to me, it's up to God. God's job. My job is to be kind and treat him with respect and do the best I can, right? And treat him gently. You obviously rebelled because of what you saw at home.
Yeah.
But now that you're older and wiser, and you've turned back you've turned back from atheism, what was your biggest takeaway from that? What meaning are you giving to that experience today from this vantage point?
I think, and now as a parent, though my little one, he'll be 3 in a couple of months, so he's not quite able to assess my flaws and my mistakes yet. But I would say that my biggest takeaway from how my parents dealt with their mistakes in front of me was, I want to be someone who owns up when I make a mistake, to be the first to apologize, to be the first to say that I'm sorry, that I messed up, that this isn't the way people are supposed to act or treat others. And I think when you step into that place of humility and just honestly owning the times when you don't get it right, I think that is the most honoring way that you can still be a person who needs Jesus, a person who isn't perfect, that's still walking it out and trying to figure out what it's supposed to look like, that honors those in your life. And so that was something where I saw them hide a lot of what they were doing, but it wasn't really ever hidden. And there was no confessing. There was no saying, you're right, like this isn't right. And I'm so sorry that you're having to experience this. I'm sorry that I'm yelling at you. I'm sorry that I don't have patience or compassion. I don't understand what you're doing, but I still love you. Like they struggled to communicate the important things, which was that I was deeply loved, even if they didn't accept what I was doing with my life. That was a struggle for them to communicate. And so for me, I'm very intentional about when I have days where I'm impatient with my son, even just going to him in his little age and saying, like, Mommy shouldn't treat you that way. I'm so sorry. I didn't communicate to you that you matter to me and that I love you, even if you threw a car at me or spilled your milk or whatever the situation is. And even though I don't know how much he's gathering from that, I know that it's been deeply healing for myself to be able to parent that way. And I know that it's going to create a different kind of relationship where he feels comfortable coming to me and saying, I made a mistake and I'm sorry. And to have him know that I'm going to respond with compassion, or if I don't in the moment, I'll at least come back later and respond with compassion when I'm able to.
That's beautiful that you parent in that way. And I assure you that he is taking it in. He is taking it in. So it will pay off in the future. I assure you of that. So my oldest son is 28. My youngest is 21. We started very young, my wife and I, but we had made the decision early in our life. We were only 17, 18 years old when we started with our family. She was going to stay home, and we were going to take our kids to church on Sunday, and we knew that was going to be the foundation of our family. We got married because a pastor kind of forced our hand and was like, hey, when are you guys getting married? When are you guys getting married? And finally, it just like hit me like, okay, I need to get married. I have all these kids here. I need to get married. Like, it's the right thing to do. all these years going to church, right?
Yeah.
But we made a decision, and we were like, okay, we're going to take our kids, we're going to be in church, because we knew as young people that the only thing that would allow us, now we've been together we just made 22 years. We've been married, so we've been together 28, 29 years. We've been together long.
Congratulations.
And we made a decision that we were going to take our kids to church, and we were going to teach them the Word of God, and they were going to learn the Bible. That was our decision. That was my decision in my family. Not pushing that on anybody. That was my decision. Everyone has their decisions to make on how they want to run their family. That's what I decided I wanted to do with my family. And we were like, we're going to take them, and when they're at an age, or when they leave the house, if they decide not to go to church, it's on them. But we're going to plant the seeds, and we're going to let God do the rest. Our prayers is that God brings them back if they stray away, or it's not up to us anymore once they become adults.
Right.
So that was our prayer as a parent, and that was our perspective as parents with our kids, that we were going to make sure we showed them the Word of God and kept them in church, and then let God take care of it from there. That's all we could do. What point probably is, maybe I'm guessing, and I don't know if maybe I'm wrong, maybe that was your parents' same thought process when they were taking you guys to church, or taking you to church. At what point did God come back and get a hold of you? What was that moment? Where was that moment, that thing that said, oh, was it an experience? Was it a memory from when you was in church and VBS, Vacation Bible School, or Sunday teacher, or a verse from the Bible? What was that moment? Can you express to us, what was that moment? What was that feeling? When exactly did that happen?
Yeah. So I was finishing up modeling. Things were kind of falling apart in New York. I was living in New York City at the time. My clients were drying up. One of my main relationships ended. My relationship with my best friend at the time ended. Things were doors were starting to close, and I went home to Florida to visit my parents for the holidays. And my dad's like, "Hey, what do you think about coming down here and working for me and doing some marketing?" Because I had been starting to do digital marketing on the side. That was one of my side hustles, and I was like, I would never leave New York to come down here and have a 9-to-5 job. Are you crazy? But by the end of the 3-week vacation down in Florida, Christmas time, so perfect weather, I was like, okay, I guess I'm leaving New York. So I packed up my apartment, told my agent goodbye. I was like, you can book me on jobs. I'll fly up here, but peace out. And just kind of escaped that burning fire in New York of bad relationships and things kind of ending, and going into a completely different environment. Life got really quiet. I didn't have all of my friends and parties and traveling and people I was dating. Life was just really kind of quiet and mundane. I had my family, which I hadn't really spent that much time around since I moved out at 16. And a lot of stuff just started to come up. A lot of the decisions that I had made, the lifestyle choices that I was involved in back in New York and when I was modeling, started to catch up to me. And I realized I was using a lot of these things to try and find comfort and peace and fulfillment, and it just wasn't working. And I was like, something has got to change. I was still struggling with some addictive behaviors, and I knew that that wasn't really good for me. I knew that it was pretty self-destructive. It was destroying relationships. It was destroying my body. And so I was like, I need help, but I don't really know where to go. I had tried secular, it wasn't AA. I didn't have an alcohol problem, but it was Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. I had gone to a group in New York, and I walked in and I was like, I am sitting in a room full of people who've been attending this same meeting for like 5 to 10 years, and they're all still struggling at the same level. They're all deeply insecure, and it wasn't a judgment on them, but a red flag went off for me that said, this clearly isn't helping anybody, because we all just sit around in a circle and say that we're addicts. And I wanted to get better. I wanted to move away from that issue. And so I got into a relationship while I was in Florida, and this guy, his family had a church, and they had a Celebrate Recovery program, which is kind of like for anyone who's ever reached for something that isn't God to fill a void in their heart, you can come to the meetings. And so we just started going. I was curious about it, even though I didn't really like the idea of it being related to God. I thought, well, maybe I can just take the bits and pieces that work for people and come up with my own solution. Very entrepreneurial of me. And what I found in there was people actually finding freedom from these self-destructive patterns. People finding freedom from anxiety and depression, people finding healing from trauma and just very hard things that they'd experienced. And they found just love and peace. And I was like, that sounds way too good to be true. But like, this is the most hopeful I've ever heard someone talk about going through something that hard. Maybe there's something to this. And so after a few months of going up to visit and being around this family and hearing the testimonies of people involved in this program, I had an honest conversation with God. And it was the first time since I was a little girl that I had ever directly addressed him in my head. And I just said, God. And I felt crazy even saying it in the moment, because I was like actually acknowledging him. But I said, God, if you're real. And I had a truly supernatural encounter with the Lord in that moment. The way I explain it is, it was like I turned the knob on a door and he pushed it open, and I felt this blanket of love wash over me. I have done drugs. I've had drug highs. I was completely sober on a Tuesday night sitting in a church pew. There was nothing in my body that would have caused me to have this experience except the presence of God. And so I felt this blanket of love wash over me. And in this moment, it's like so many thoughts are going through my head, but I felt so seen, so known, so loved, so just like brought in, like I belonged to someone. And I'd never felt that way before, not even my own family. And it was one of those moments where I just, anytime like the inkling of doubt has come to me, I just go back to that moment. It's like, it's so undeniably real, the way I experienced him. And it just shredded any ounce of atheism. And it also completely changed my mind about who God actually was. And it was this message of grace that had continued to draw me towards him, that no matter what you've done, no matter what choices you've made, he wants a relationship with us. And so for me, that was just so powerful, because I'd done a lot of things that had led to a lot of people rejecting me. People that were supposed to love me no matter what. And here was God saying, I do love you no matter what. And I love you enough to not let you stay there. And I'm going to help you walk away from these things, but you don't have to change in order for me to love you. Like, I love you as you are. And that was just so powerful for me.
Very powerful. Are there any aspects of your former atheist beliefs or worldwide views that you still hold on to today?
No.
Could you give
No,
an example of something that changed, one of your views that changed from his life to now?
Sure. I mean, I used to base a lot of my happiness and my peace on external things. It was like, if I have this much money in my bank account, then I will be at peace. Then I can feel secure. If I have the right relationships and have everything kind of set up in a way that doesn't make me too vulnerable or, doesn't leave me too exposed, then I'll feel safe and comfortable. Those kinds of views where I was looking to things outside of myself that I really actually had no control over, in order to find fulfillment, which never led me to fulfillment. Now it kind of doesn't matter what's going on in my life. Oh, sorry. My baseline is I'm okay because God's okay with me. And he's more than capable to help me tackle any of these issues that come up, but I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to catastrophize my life or think that things are falling apart. Even if things don't really look good, I have a hope that I will figure it out, that he'll help me figure it out. And life has only continued to get better since coming to the Lord.
I want to take you back when you was that model, hot-headed kid in New York City, right? And wasn't trying to hear jack about the Bible or anything about God.
Yeah.
And how can now, being where you are today, and I want to bring you back here, how do we bridge the gap so that atheists, people that are atheists and people of faith can have productive conversations about these topics? How would you do it? Because that is a big issue in the church, right? Where, the pastors and those of us that are believers, we don't believe on this whole comic whatever theory, we just exist.
Right.
No, we don't believe that. And atheist people are, while they say they're atheists, but they believe in something. There's some sort of something that they believe in. That we're all spiritual beings. There's something that you believe in. Like, you don't believe in, you can't see your spirit, right? But you believe that you have one. All of us believe that we have that, right? Because when we die and we're in a coffin, there's nothing there. It's just our body, right? Because it was something else. So how would you have that conversation? How can atheist people and people of faith have productive conversations where, atheists and some Christians can be very aggressive with it too. So it's on both sides. I'm not going to sit here and try to be like, oh, for sure. Christians can be very aggressive with this crap. So no. I just believe in compassion. I believe I believe that God just gave us, our biggest tool is compassion. Compassion for one another and zero judgment for one another, and just love and compassion.
I think the biggest thing that God gives us is hope. And like you said, compassion. So if I was talking to my younger self, I would have tried to reach her where she was at. Sometimes Christians and atheists, or just people of different religions, get into the semantics. We start going for apologetics. I can make the best logical, reasonable argument, I can change this person's mind. Well, that's not what changed my mind. It was encountering the love of God and having an experience with him that really connected me to his true heart for me. And so if I can be a person that embodies the love of Christ to someone who doesn't know him and does not know that side of him, and maybe has only experienced that kind of hypocritical, judgmental side of his people, then I think that is the best tool that we can give. I do believe that it's important to speak the truth, but it's also important to share the truth of the gospel in language that people outside of church understand. And if someone had come to me talking about repentance and atonement and throwing words around like that, I would have not known what they were talking about. Now I have deep affection for those things because I understand what it means, but I wouldn't talk to somebody outside of a biblical context in that way. I wouldn't use Bible words or Christianese to
how would you
them.
talk to them? Talk to me. How would you talk to me if I'm them? What would you say to,
Um,
how would you approach, what would you say to an atheist, right? How do,
yeah.
how do you tell an atheist that God exists without, quoting Proverbs 10:16, right? Or James 10:16, or right? How do you,
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Well, so this is a very short, I'll try to keep it as short as possible,
Sure.
explanation of the gospel that doesn't use overly Christian
Bible
language.
words. Yeah.
so so we've got the world that we live in, and most of us are searching for something that can satisfy. Like, we've got these longings. We want to be loved. We want to feel connected. We want to be accepted. And so we're searching for those things in meaning of our careers, our relationships, lots of different avenues, maybe our looks and, keeping fit and whatever you're doing, looking for that satisfaction, looking for that acceptance and belonging. But if we look at the world today, what we see is a lot of chaos, a lot of brokenness, a lot of failed attempts at feeling connected, feeling a sense of belonging, and feeling loved. And that the reason for that brokenness is because the world is operating today in a way that it wasn't designed for. So much of the world lives outside of relationship with God, the Creator. And His original design for the world was that we would feel loved, connected, and a sense of belonging. And so, in order to bring us back to that place where we feel that way, where we can experience that on this earth, He sent His Son. And His Son had a plan to restore us back to that place of connection, love, and belonging. And He died for us, and He rose again. And because of the sacrifice that He made to give His life for us in love, that restored a connection back to this original design where you can belong, where you can matter. And that is exactly what I experienced the day that I got saved, was all of those things: connection, love, belonging. And so I've been restored to that original design, and that is a gift that's available for free. God really doesn't ask anything from us in order to receive it, except to give a little bit of faith, to just crack the door and give Him a chance to show us that He really does love us and desires to restore that original design to us.
Thank you.
So that's got the claps. Thanks.
Very well put. I'm feeling very grateful right now that God used you and me in this moment to help someone somewhere in the world listening to this. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for coming on here. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for everything that you're doing and being a light to the world. If folks wanted to connect with you, maybe there's a young lady out there that heard you, right? And she aspires to be a model, or she is a model, or she aspires to be an actress, and she's in California. We have a big listenership in LA. Maybe she's in California, maybe she's in Chicago, maybe, and she's like, relate to her. And they wanted to connect with you, and maybe there's an opportunity for you to coach them or mentor them or something, or just have a conversation with that young girl. How can they connect with you? Are you on social media? Where do they find you? How do they connect with you? Talk to me.
Yeah. So I have a website, gathergrowministries.com. And even if you're not a believer listening to this, but you're like, I feel that sense of loneliness and just how do I navigate this really difficult industry, please reach out. I would love to connect with you. So gathergrowministries.com. You can find me there, use the contact list. And then also I'm on Instagram and TikTok, Gather Grow Ministries, and then at Gather Grow on YouTube. And I've got some teachings over there where you can check out some things. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Caleigh, for coming on. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor.
Thanks for having me.
And before I let you go, what's the one thing, what's the one elite strategy that you can share with the audience that maybe you didn't share yet, that they need to hear, but you haven't shared yet? What would that one thing be, if there's any?
Mm. I mean, my elite strategy for finding true success in life has been developing a healthy surrender to God. That is my number one. It has changed and transformed the way I think about money, the way I think about relationships, the way I think about career and goals. It's the foundation that has led me to so much success in so many different areas by really just surrendering to that original design and finding who I was truly made to be and living from that place instead of who I thought I should be.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, my dear. Thank you for coming on. Really, really, really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.